What's up, backyard bass fans? Alright, today's video we're going to go over a couple easy steps you can take to start to learn how to skip, like jigs and swim jigs and Texas rig baits, stuff like that. So first off, if you've never tried to do skipping at all and you've got a bait caster and you're pretty comfortable with it, you can try it with your bait caster. But for you others out there that are complete beginners and you're not extremely comfortable with a bait caster and this and that, even the guys that are comfortable with it, it's still a challenge to skip a bait. So the one thing I did when I first started learning was I actually threw a spinning setup. With the spinning setup, you don't have to worry about the backlash and everything else, but the whole point of that is to get your mechanics down. And as far as your mechanics go, I'm talking about your wrist action. That is going to play a huge role in your skipping ability. When I first started, my biggest thing that I started off with was, one, I started off with a trick worm. Just rig it up completely weightless with an EWG hook or a worm hook, it doesn't matter, either one. And make sure you tuck your hook point into the worm because you don't want to end up getting snagged and everything else. But your wrist action, like I said, is going to be your biggest mechanics of this whole thing and make this actually work properly. So the main thing you want to do is, one, you want to get as low to the water as you can with your rod tip. Now, but when I say that, I don't mean that you want to throw down like this. You don't want to do that, because all that's going to happen is your bait's going to go down, it's going to smack the water, and it's going to blow it up right there. So imagine it kind of like you're skipping a rock on the water. You're going to bring that rod tip down, and you want to come down, almost at an angle of like a baseball swing. You're going to want to come down and up. Now, the reason you want to come up is when that bait hits, it's going to want to stall right there. Well, when you're bringing your rod tip up a little bit, that's pulling that line up off the water. And the reason you want to pull that line up off the water is if that line gets down in the water, it's going to drag it down, and it's just going to stop right then and there. You want to keep everything out of the water as much as possible. So when you do that, take that thing and just give it a good whip, and when you're coming through, follow through with your wrist up. You want your rod tip to go up with it. As long as the bait keeps going, keep raising your rod tip. And that's pretty much the main key to skipping, is making sure you follow through with that rod tip and keep coming up with it. Like I said, if you just throw it and let it go right there, that line's going to get down in the water and it's just going to drag it, and it's going to stop pretty quick. But just like I said, roll your wrist through there, let that tip come up real good, and let that bait just keep gliding across the water. Another one that I really liked throwing right off the bat was just like a 5-inch or even a 6-inch senko. It's got a little bit more weight to it, so you're going to get a little bit more of a harder whip with it to kind of get your wrist action going. Like I said, that's what I practiced with when I first started, and it worked really, really well. And guys, don't be afraid to go out there and just blow up a reel. I mean, it happens. That's how you learn. I mean, that's how you get better. I couldn't tell you how many times I've blown mine up. I mean, it's ridiculous. So with that in mind, you might want to try this with some cheap mono or cheap copolymer or something like that. Don't use your expensive everyday line that you normally throw. But go to Walmart or wherever you've got close to you, buy some real cheap line and try it. Now, don't go and buy like a 20-pound test. That's going to be a little bit big and a little bit harder to use. So go with something like 12 or 15, something you're used to throwing. One other thing that I will tell you, as far as a bait caster goes, is when you first start out doing this, a lot of guys will turn the reels down real tight. That is actually the opposite of what you want to do. I'm not saying loosen it up to where it's just falling everywhere. I'm not saying that. But you do want to loosen your reel up pretty loose. And the reason being is when you go through that cast like that, you don't want any resistance, because any resistance at all, as soon as that bait skips that first time or hits that water the first time, it's going to stop that spool, or stop the line, but the spool is going to keep going. So what you want to do is make sure that spool is a little bit loose, so when it hits that water the first time, your spool's loose enough that it can keep going and your line will keep going with it. You don't want it, like I said, you don't want it tight. It's going to make it a whole lot more difficult for you. Another good technique that I did for a little while too, if you have it, that works really well for underhand pitching and skipping, is a concrete floor. If you've got a smooth concrete floor, that's a great way to do it. Even, don't tell your wives this, but you know, the kitchen floor works pretty well too, if you got tall enough ceilings just to kind of finesse it in there a little bit. And now that I say that, that brings up another point. Guys, don't go out there and try to throw a 7.3 or a 7.6 or even an 8-foot rod. I mean, it's ridiculous. You're not tall enough to accommodate for that length of that rod. You want a smaller rod, something like a 6.6 works really well. If you're on a boat that you set up a lot higher in the water, you know, maybe you can get away with a 7-foot or something, or even a 7.3. But typically, you know, I'm not a tall guy. I'm like 5'10". I stick with about a 7-foot, and that's pretty much where I'm comfortable with. When I first started, you know, I was a 6'6" guy, you know, because that was the only thing I could get comfortable with and have just the right angle that I wasn't just smashing it into the water. So another thing you guys want to look for when you're trying this too, when you get into the bait casting and trying to skip, is you want more of a wide flat bait, like a Missile D-bomb, the Rage Bug, stuff like that. You know, wider flat bait will work a whole lot better for skipping. And another thing that will help you out is using like a 1/2 ounce. Don't go to the 3/4, don't go under the 1/2 ounce. Under the 1/2 ounce is getting to where it's a little too light. It makes it harder. The 3/4 is just getting too heavy, and I mean, once you get a little better with it and you start learning how to skip a little bit more, then you can go to that 3/4 ounce, because you got to whip it pretty hard to do it. So stay in that 1/2 ounce range. Like I said, get you a flat bait. Jigs, if you're going to throw a jig or skip a jig, swim jigs work really, really well. I throw mine with a Menace on it, the Rage Menace. It skips extremely well. I don't have any issues with that. But as far as a jig, you know, get you just any kind of jig will work, that has like somewhat of a flat head. Like a football jig is not going to be ideal for that. I'm not saying you can't do that. I'm just saying I wouldn't go with a football head jig trying to learn. But like, then again, make sure your bait is kind of flat and wide, so it has a little bit of a surface that it can stay on top of the water and skip good. And guys, I'll be honest with you. A lot of people look at going into the fall, you know, this time of year, that, you know, you're not going to be flipping under docks and stuff like that. I will tell you, you are flat out wrong. If that sun's still getting up high and that water's still warm enough that these fish are pretty active, they're going to be under those docks. They're going to be under those limbs, those shade lines. You know, they're still going to go there. As long as that sun's getting up high, that's where they're going to be. Now, later on in the year, you're talking November, December, somewhere around there, you know, your sun's not going to be up at that real high point anymore. You know, it's going to be off to the side a little bit. So it don't happen as much then. But right now, I'm telling you guys, they're still getting under that shade line. They still don't want to look up at that sky when it's bright blue sunny skies and that sun's beating down on them, especially when it's high in the sky. So, you know, don't be afraid to start skipping now. You know, get underneath them docks and stuff. This time of year is probably one of my favorite times to throw a jig, especially around docks and stuff like that. So, you know, get out there, try it, guys. You have any problems, you have any questions or anything, you know, leave your comments down below. I will answer every single one of them. So that's all I got for you guys today. You know, if you could, make sure you subscribe to the channel, help the channel growing. I'd really appreciate it. Don't forget to smash that thumbs up, and we'll see you guys again next time. Thanks.